Hey everybody, this is Cameron from Obnoxious and Anonymous, and welcome to another chapter review out of Mark Frost's book, Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier. Today, my guest is Mandy. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm glad you're feeling better. You had a bit of a cold over the weekend.
Yes, bronchitis, super fun.
Well, like I said, I'm glad you're doing better. Glad you're able to join me for today's video. Today we are
Yes.
today we are going to be discussing the Shelly Johnson chapter. This is one that honestly, if someone was to say, what was a chapter in this book that surprised you? I don't think before reading it I would have said Shelly Johnson, but the
Mm-hmm.
Shelly Johnson chapter did surprise me
Yeah,
in
yeah.
in a few different ways. Um, all right, so you just got the book, and without maybe going to specifics about other chapters, what do you think of the book so far? I know you finished it today, but
I love it. I was surprised how much I liked it. I still haven't gotten through the first book, which I will at some point. I'm more inclined to read the first book or finish the first book now that I've read the second book. But the second book I couldn't put down. I was up at 6 o'clock this morning just because I had to finish the last few chapters. And it's a great read. It's total fan service, and I loved all of it. So
and tell them what you said to me about when you got to the ending. You said you almost cried.
I did almost cry. I mean, those that have read it, the last little bit when they talk about the uh, interchanging time dimensions and stuff, and what's actually happened, what the current reality is. That's my favorite part of the whole thing. About it has to do with Laura. So when you do a video on that, then we'll talk about that then. So,
So your favorite
but
part of the book is when it was over.
yeah, actually, that's the way that plays out. Is yes, exactly. But it was a good ending. So
All right. Well, let's talk about Shelly Johnson. It's amazing that her name is still Johnson, considering that you know, Tamara Preston seems to know a lot of facts about a lot of the people in this town. But what we don't ever have is Shelley's maiden name.
hmm
I find that incredibly interesting that we don't have that. A lot of people, myself included, before season three began, we all assumed her maiden name was Rod because there
yeah,
were all these rumors out there that she was the daughter of Carl Rod, played by Harry Dean Stanton.
hmm
And that was probably going to be the reason why he moved the Fat Trout Trailer Park up to Twin Peaks to be closer to his daughter and granddaughter.
yeah.
That made logical sense. However, that's not what we got in season three. so,
No,
so the scene of Shelley talking with Carl Rod that we saw in the series had nothing to do with him being her parent.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
yes, she is not the daughter of Harry Dean Stanton, Carl Rod.
yeah.
But that would have been a nice touch, though, don't you think?
hmm I think so. It would have just kind of, um, it would have brought it sealed the gap between Fire Walk with Me and the show for one thing. Just kind of one thing to bring it together. So,
And
and
also,
yeah,
Shelley, if you think about who she is, she probably comes from a trailer park, So,
yeah,
I mean, now in the original series, we didn't see that kind of, as far as I can remember, that kind of economic, we didn't get. I mean, yeah, we got Evelyn Marsh and her ritzy house over here, and we got Shelley Johnson's house with the plastic in the kitchen.
yeah,
But it just seemed like they were doing more like home renovations more than that they were poor.
hmm
I think in this new season, you really sensed how poor people were by just everyone living in the mobile homes and the trailer parks and that type of thing. It seemed much more pronounced in this new
yeah,
season.
yeah, very much so. Um, there weren't like horn houses and big houses like the Haywards and even the Palmers too. It was any house that we really went to were mobile. So
They were either
yeah,
mobile homes or they were those suburban homes that all look alike, like the Dougie neighborhoods and
Hmm.
stuff. So it was like you either conformed or you lived off the grid,
Yeah, yeah.
pretty much here.
But it was
Uh,
very much made evident that Twin Peaks was not is not a wealthy community, that there are
Anymore,
anymore. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, because we never really spent any time in Donna's neighborhood. Obviously, Laura's mom is still there at their house, but it seemed like when you were in the original series, we spent a lot of time in just middle class neighborhoods,
Hmm.
and in season 3, we never went to those neighborhoods. Right? Like I said,
Yeah.
we were either really poor or either Las Vegas rich with the Mitchum brothers or conformity with the Dougie neighborhood.
Yeah.
Anyway, so getting back to Shelly,
Hmm.
it says Tamara reports that she is the only child of a dysfunctional local marriage that ended in early divorce, exasperated by alcoholism and repeated incidents of spousal abuse. Well, I guess Shelly married her father.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we call daddy issues.
Now, if there's one thing about Shelly Johnson that we can surmise after seeing all 3 seasons, is she, even though Bobby Briggs has a lot of great qualities, especially now, he was kind of the bad boy in season 1. And then when he became good, she went off with Red, another bad boy.
Hmm.
So I get the feeling that Shelly likes the bad boys until they kind of become the kind of guys that you would want to bring home to dad, and then she's off to the next guy. Like
Well,
when
when
they were sitting at that diner with Becky and Dan Ashbrook's watching her run out there with Red, he's kind of like, "Oh, I remember when she used to do that with me." But
yeah.
then it was cute. Now it just looks pathetic and sad.
Yeah. Yeah. But when all you know is dysfunction, it's like it's ingrained in you, right? So that's how these cycles and these generational things of repeated idiocy happen because you grow up with what you're taught. So it's unfortunate.
Definitely. Okay, so she goes on to say that her Twin Peaks high school transcripts showed that she was a bright and promising student, but she dropped out of her junior year to be with Leo, which we knew from the original series.
Mhm.
Um, okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. She says a covert relationship between Shelley and Laura Palmer's boyfriend Bobby appears to have overlapped a large percentage of her nearly 2-year marriage to Leo. Okay, great. It says corroborated testimony also suggests that this relationship with Bobby during high school predated Leo and that Bobby and Shelley were contemporaries who knew each other all the way back to elementary school. Now, this is the way I always interpreted the show. I always thought of is Bobby was with Laura, Shelley was married to Leo. I always assumed Shelley was like 20, 21 or so, and Bobby was a high school senior. I had always thought that because Bobby knew that Laura was probably seeing other people behind his back, he thought it was okay to kind of cheat on her too, so that he didn't get his heart completely smashed, even though he was completely obsessed with her. Shelley, you know, Leo's always on the road. He's an abusive, husband. So she's looking for any way out she can. And so Bobby and her ended up being a relationship of convenience that actually began to care about each other as the longer they were together. That's the way I always interpreted it, especially since in the series, when Bobby says to Sheriff Truman, like, listen, Shelly and I are together. We've been together long before Laura ever died. So I thought, okay, yeah, they were together obviously while Laura was alive, and then obviously because we got introduced to them in the pilot already in the middle of their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but Mark Frost flips it on us and says no, Bobby and Shelly were the original couple, and that he left Shelly for Laura.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what drove Shelly to be with Leo. Now, what? Now, what do you think about that? Does that line up with what you thought, or do you think this is a symptom of the new timeline? Or, I mean, I don't. I honestly think that this is supposed to be like fact even before the timeline has turned.
Yeah, I don't think that an alternate timeline is at play here. I think we're just being brought into information that we did not know before because it was never brought up. It was never, you know, told to us. So, but that was shocking. That was that was the first kind of, apart from finding out that Leo had actually died, which is what starts the book. Then you get to this, and it's like, whoa, this is some good stuff. I had no idea. Obviously, we had no idea, but I liked this. I like this idea that they were together, and I don't like the idea that Bobby cheated on her with Laura, but it shows. It kind of shows that even a close couple can be broken by this enigmatic person that Laura was. That every person was drawn to her regardless of where they were in their life, what circumstances they were with, that when Laura appears, she's the one and everybody has to go for her. So
Well, let me
so
throw out a scene here that Mark Frost paints that I would have loved to have seen visually represented. And then that says, when Shelley realized that Bobby was two-timing her with Laura, she confronted him in an angry public scene that disrupted the junior prom. I wish I could see that moment because
I can see shoulder pads and teased hair
yeah.
and all that stuff. Yeah.
But while I read that, this is what I think of. I flash back to that scene in Fire Walk with Me when Laura is going to do the Meals on Wheels and she bumps into the grandmother and the young boy. And she goes, Shelly, I can't do it. I can't, and she runs away and Shelly's like, what? And then she puts the tray in the car and shuts the trunk. And I think to myself, God, Shelly just doesn't seem very nice to Laura. It just kind of seems kind of standoffish to her at that moment. And I always took it as like, well, Shelly knows that she's seen Laura's boyfriend behind Laura's back, so she's kind of keeping her distance. But this information changes everything looking at that scene, because now I look at it and go, Shelly's looking at the woman who stole her boyfriend from her, but she also is now sleeping with him again. Well, that really causes a rift. And then you have Laura, who knows. I mean, like, I always thought that Laura may have been aware that Bobby was seeing Shelly on the side or not, but Laura has to know that Bobby was seeing Shelly prior to their relationship since he was two-timing with her.
Yeah.
Right. So why would Laura want to work with Bobby's previous girlfriend except to kind of shove it in her face that, that I'm still here? But Shelly kind of gets her revenge by saying, yeah, you may have taken him away from me, but I got him back.
Yeah.
And I may be married, but I'm with him. And you may be with Bobby, but I'm with Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
If you just take that like 10-second scene of Fire Walk with Me, and obviously these actors didn't have this information. This is information I'm plugging in from Mark Frost's book. But I look at that scene now, knowing this information. There's a lot of tension now when I look at that scene.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot to take in.
It did. It created a completely different scene that you're looking at, all unspoken still. But yeah, it changes the dynamic greatly.
So Shelly leaves the prom and goes to the Roadhouse and meets up with Leo Johnson, who Tamara says, who just rolled in from a road trip.
Mm-hmm.
And starts fixing her some illicit cocktails. And before the night was over, one thing led to another. So Leo and Shelly obtained the necessary paperwork and they got married 3 weeks later. Now, here's my question for you. Knowing Leo Johnson's pattern, he's working with Jacques Renault, he's running drugs, he's got this trucking business over here. Why does he want to marry Shelly? I mean, I can understand him wanting to have like an affair with Shelly or a hot, steamy, a couple months with Shelly, but 3 weeks later, marrying her? What, you know what I mean? Like, what? Why would Leo Johnson marry this junior in high school? I mean, I know he's a control freak, but he wouldn't even have to bother with that. He could just kind of be free. And he wants to be partying with, Ronette and Laura and all them.
Yeah.
Why settle down?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess I could ask that to any guy who gets married and still wants to cheat on the side, but I'm just curious. Leo does not seem like the kind of guy who wants to come home to a wife.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, he was like 6 years older than her. And theoretically, I mean, it seems by the book that Shelly and Bobby and Laura are all the same age. So I know that you had said that you always pictured her as being like 20 or 21, but it doesn't look like it. It looks like, from this anyway, that they're all around 17 or 18. So, you've got a guy in his mid-20s at this point. I don't know, maybe he was at the point where he wanted to settle down. Maybe he thought she was the hottest thing ever. Like, I gotta, lock this down while I can. I don't know. I mean, they don't give us enough information about Leo, which is fine because nobody really cares. But it does seem strange.
Well, let me go. Let me throw out some possible reasons.
Okay.
I think by this information, right? And of course, Lynch and Frost always want us to put on our thinking caps and think about these things. So here's what I think. I think Shelly was a virgin. And I think that she always figured that whoever she lost her virginity to, she would marry. And probably Leo heard this and was like, "Oh, I'll marry you, sweetheart." And that's how that happened. Because that explains why Shelly and Bobby are just so hot for each other. Because she seems like not like a young woman who's kind of like, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool to just kind of cheat on my husband," all this kind of stuff. It seems like a woman who's kind of learning to embrace her sexuality. And now Bobby is kind of rolling around in that, literally, that's just kind of, now that's the vibe I'm getting from this.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, do you have a different take on it?
No.
No.
No. That can make sense. I mean, again, and you've got this girl that comes from a dysfunctional family where there's abuse, there's alcoholism, there's a whole bunch of,
and she wants to get out of her house.
Exactly. Yeah. So she could have just, really just played a part and made herself completely irresistible to Leo, that he was like, "Okay, yeah, baby, let's get married." Like, I mean, that could be what happened too. Like,
there's so many possibilities.
Yeah. But I would see it being her more pushing him to get married than him being like, "Hey, I want to marry you."
No, of course. And that's why I'm saying that's why I get the vibe about maybe her putting the pressure on him. Like, "Hey, I said I would only do this if I was married," and this, that type of thing. Who knows? I mean, there's a variety of things that could happen. So it says, okay, let me see where we are. Within a few weeks of Leo dying, Shelly and Bobby began to appear together around town in public places. Clearly a couple again. So, but we saw that at the end of the second season, when Leo was presumed dead, but when Leo went missing. Mm-hmm. Bobby and Shelly kind of made their relationship public knowledge by announcing it in the sheriff's station, where he's like, "Look, Sheriff, here's the deal. Shelly and I have been together." When they're being interrogated by Sheriff Truman about about Leo disappearing and waking up from his coma. And then at the
Oh, right.
And then at the end of season 2, when they're in the double R and they're like, "Mer, mer, 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 mer." Yeah, whatever they're doing. But that's, I'm just saying that, like, obviously they're not caring who's seeing them do that.
Not at that point. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And Leo still is not presumed dead at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, we've come a long way since Norma, I'll see you in my dreams. And then Norma's like, not if I see you first. Like when you see the pilot, you're thinking maybe Norma has a thing for Bobby too,
Yeah.
It kind of seems
I
that
think
way.
she's hot to trot for you herself.
Yeah.
As she says.
And then that's never brought up again.
No. And yet they do those pictures for Entertainment Weekly that are like, I did hear some rumblings online that they're like, ooh, are Norma and Bobby together now? Like, is that why she's all over him in those pictures? No, the pictures were dumb. They didn't go with anything. So anyway.
Right. So Tamara goes on to say that even though Leo Johnson died, Shelly and Bobby were found not guilty. Not that they were put through a trial, but they weren't going to be prosecuted because they didn't do anything to necessarily lead to Leo's death.
Yeah, there was no point. There were no trails. It was just, they were not in question.
So Bobby and Shelly then ran off to Reno and got married. No family attended. Now, that's probably because they just ran off to do it. I don't think Major Briggs and his wife Betty would have not gone to the wedding. But obviously Shelly's family doesn't care, so off they go.
Well, and they say that it's a year after Leo's death, so a lot has happened in this time. Like Briggs is already dead by this point.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good point. Thank you. All right. Now it says they had a daughter, Rebecca Macaulay Briggs. Shelly's estranged mother died that same year at 47. It says, I love this where it says, Bobby's mother, grieving the recent loss of her own husband, which she pointed out, stepped up to the plate, devoting herself to providing her son and his new wife, Shelly, a stability they sorely needed for their new family. And as she had done since the day Shelly began working at the Double R, Norma Jennings, soon to lose her own husband, played the role of the surrogate mother that Shelly had always needed. She seemed like that in the original series as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So then it says Norma and Betty joined forces to co-sign a loan that allowed Bobby and Shelly to buy their first house. Within a year of Leo's death, Shelly Johnson, turning 21, now had a home, a husband she loved, a beautiful child, a supportive circle of friends and customers at a job she adored. Well, that's a pretty nice life.
Yeah.
I wonder why it all got thrown away for big old Red.
Well, Balthazar Getty's pretty hot, but Dana Ashbrook's hotter. I just had to throw that in there. Okay, so it says here within a year of Leo's death, and she turned 21. So,
right.
So maybe she is older than Bobby and Laura.
Well, it's said that they were the same age. So even in its own chapter, it kind of switches up.
Well, yeah, but I mean, well, yeah, actually, because they had known each other since elementary school and were at the junior prom together. So that would make you think that they're in the same age, but they weren't 20 when all this stuff happened.
You know what? The same book says Donna Hayward turned 18 in 1992. So,
jeez. Yeah.
When all of these
that
events
is incorrect.
When all these events take place in 1989. Yeah. So, yeah. So, okay. And then it finishes it up by saying, of all the personal stories I've now surveyed in Twin Peaks, Shelly seems to be one of the lucky ones. But then, as you well know, Chief, most stories have more than one act. I'll return to this one with Deputy Briggs. All right.
which actually I don't think they did. I don't think they talk about Bobby and Shelley anymore in this book.
No, they don't. But I think she was talking about Bobby just by himself. He
Yeah.
doesn't get his own chapter, but
Oh, that would have been so nice.
that would have been a great transition chapter for him.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to give us a little bit more of like his turning points as to when he, decided to get rid of the bad boy thing and kind of grow up and be a man. Like,
Yeah, because when the series first started and we see him in the hallway, I was actually thinking like, I really hope he didn't become a cop so he could better deal drugs.
yeah, yeah,
Because he seemed to, I mean, when the sheriff is kind of surprised that he knows all these different routes. He's like, all known routes. He's like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because Bobby's checking the routes he used to do when he was running drugs.
yeah.
And the sheriff doesn't know about those routes. So, and I was going, oh my God, please, Bobby, please don't still be doing terrible things.
That would have been such a disservice to fans, to the show, to Bobby himself. That would have been really distasteful, I think. So they did good. They did good by Bobby. Bobby did good. So
But he still seems kind of dumbfounded by seeing a young girl just throwing up in the car. He's just like, huh?
that whole scene, I mean, what can you say about that whole scene?
But I love, love, love the scene of when Bobby comes in and sees Laura's picture.
you
That is
know,
one. I love that scene because he's just like not so much the crying of and seeing Laura's picture, like that's fine. But I love when he goes, Cooper. Yeah, yeah, FBI agent Cooper. Yeah, I know. Cooper was the last guy who saw my dad alive. Like he's not playing it up like a mystery. He's playing it up like it's a personal thing because Cooper saw his dad before he died and Bobby didn't.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I love
yeah,
that
that's
touch
true.
with that Badalamenti score underneath it, and
Hmm.
him and Bobby just like, yeah, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's so touching.
And you've talked a lot about, or you've pointed out specifically Richard Beamer about how fluid he is of reprising his role as Ben. That it's like no time had passed, and I really felt the same with Dana Ashbrook. I don't know if it's just the way that he speaks, um, but it was just like, oh yeah, okay, like it was so natural. He's so natural at being Bobby that there was no fakeness or like, oh, he's a little rusty or anything like that. He was just as fluid, in my opinion, as Richard Beamer was as Ben. um, it was beautiful. Like it was so nice to see him have something good to chew on. So
Now, because
yeah.
this is the Shelley chapter, let's flip it. How do you think Machen Amick was in season 3 as Shelley? Does she still seem like Shelley to you?
No, she didn't, because Shelley in seasons 1 and 2 was so broken and vulnerable and
Likeable.
likable and naive and young. And in season 3, I mean,
They
they just
basically
kind of they made her kind of a douchebag, like
they
she
made her
wasn't.
they made her like a negligent parent. Just
Yeah, yeah,
like you have a daughter who just shot up a door. Your husband's saying she could be prosecuted for this, but he's gonna kind of just try to sweep it under. And then she runs out the door to make out with Red and out in the on the sidewalk. It's just like,
yeah,
who are you? You
yeah.
trying. I know you're trying to rekindle your youth here, and you're still working at the job you've been working at since you were 16. But can we stop acting like we're 16?
Well, and that's exactly what it was, is that she's just incredibly immature.
But I
And
didn't. Okay, did you feel? I mean, maybe if you did yes and no pros and cons with this, you could probably say Shelley in seasons 1 and 2 are immature. I mean, she's cheating on this husband of hers that's very abusive, instead of getting in a divorce and leaving him. Uh, she's trying to commit insurance fraud, with Leo, with Bobby's assistance, obviously. But the way Machen Amick played her in season 1 and 2, she never was unlikable.
Mm-hmm.
She was always sympathetic or
Yeah.
empathetic. You really related to her, and you always wanted the best for her.
Yeah. You cared about her.
Whether it was her and Bobby, her alone, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
This new season, now I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm just trying to show the differences. This new season, I like Major Namek. I like the character of Shelly Johnson, but she had no sympathy towards her now.
No.
Because she just seemed like even when she tried to care, she wasn't caring.
Mm-hmm.
The only moment was like when she was in the back of the car with Harry Dean Stanton, trying to get a hold of Bobby because Becky's running around with the gun. But Shelly just jumping on the car like the Dukes of Hazzard and stuff. It's just, I don't know. It's so absurd.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and whenever she was on screen, for the most part, I don't know. It was like, wow, I really liked you when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about, I'm not saying that as in like in a sexist way. I'm just saying her personality was much more likable as this
Yeah.
character. But that's not the character that Frost and Lynch gave her to play now. It's not like, well, Machen Amick made the wrong acting decisions and that's why it's unlikable. That's the
Yeah.
character. That's the character she was playing.
Exactly. Yeah. And Machen is incredible. Like, I mean, she's good in everything she does. I'm currently enjoying her on Riverdale because it's a great show. Anyway, she's very good at what she does, but unlike what I just said about Bobby and Dina Ashbrook, how they had given him something really beautiful to portray, they turned Shelley into just this. She was embarrassing. Like, her actions were embarrassing. They weren't something of a mature woman who had a daughter, who had a family. Um, she was just trying to be a little punk, and it was unflattering and just kind of dumb. It felt like it was a disservice to Shelley and to Machen what they gave her to do. So,
But she didn't do a bad job with it.
no, she's great at, because we basically we didn't like her anymore, and that's a testament to her acting. It's that she's made this character that we loved. All of a sudden, she's like, we don't like you anymore. She's a great actress, but the story that they gave her, I it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I just wish there was a little more to it,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to just the only scene we really see of her and Bobby is that scene in the diner together.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping for a little bit more of their story together. Even there's that moment in the series too where it seems like you see the back of Bobby's head sitting at the booth, and while she's serving all the coffee to a sleepwalk. So that's like the only other little moment, and that's even a throwaway moment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, obviously they did, I feel like, the best they could do with the material they were given to do. That being said, I really like this chapter of the book because it brought us back to the old Shelley and showed us how she kind of got everything she did want. She had her happy ending, and for whatever reason, whether it was Bobby's fault, her fault, I don't know whose fault, they blew it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
now they are where they are.
Yeah. Which
So,
does happen too, right? It's, I've always heard stories of good girls that go after the bad boys and stuff, and then um they either get them, or they get a good guy and they legitimately don't know what to do with them because they can't handle normalcy. They need dysfunction because it's ingrained in them. So that could be, once Bobby turned good, maybe she just didn't. there was no spark there anymore because
and
she's dysfunctional.
that's what it looks like. It looks
Hmm.
like that Shelly from this chapter has become her own mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, but it happens.
Yep.
But anyway, Mandy, thank you so much for joining me on this chapter discussion. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And,
Thanks for having me.
of course. And everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate all your support, your likes, and shares. It's really wonderful having you guys on this journey with us. So, in the meantime, you guys take it easy, and I will see you soon. Take care. Bye.